Hey, everybody. You are listening to the Songwriters Across Texas podcast, where we get to know musicians through their stories and introduce you to some of their music. I'm your host, Karl Anderson, and today we're at Arlyn Studios in Austin, Texas. My special guest is Jon Dee Graham. Jon Dee Graham is a man's man, a family man. He's also a woman's man, and at times he's been a troubled man. He's a musician and a prolific songwriter that I personally have been inspired by for the last 25 years. If you lived in Austin, or particularly Austin in the last 40-something years, and you like music, you know how important Jon Dee is. He was a member of two seminal bands, the Skunks with Jesse Sublette and the True Believers with Alejandro Escovedo. But you didn't have to be in Texas to see him. He toured all over, played shows at CBGB's and Max's Kansas City, opening for the likes of The Clash and Joe Ely. For 20 years, he's been gracing the stage on Wednesday night residencies at the Continental Club in Austin. It is my great privilege to introduce our guest today, Jon Dee Graham.
Everywhere I have been, everyone that I have met, every sun that rose and set, it brought me here to you. That's right, it brought me here to you. Every word I have heard, every word that I have said, every thought bouncing around my head, it brought me here to you. That's right, it brought me here to you. So long, so hard, so good, so far. Every mistake I have made, every single mistake I've made, let me repeat. The mistakes I've made, they brought me here to you. That's right, they brought me here to you. Yeah, they brought me here to you. Yes, they brought me here to you. Hey, Karl, how you doing, man?
Jon Dee, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm pretty good, actually. I wanted to do a correction, though. 27 years at the Continental Club.
Oh, I got it wrong.
It's okay. But I thought that I had the longest running residency. And then it was pointed out to me that actually the blues specialists have been playing happy hours at the Continental Club for 35 years.
Really?
I went in to pick up some money, and it was right before they were going to play. And their bass player, I think his name is Ernie, elderly gentleman, I mean, a few years older than me, is sitting at the bar with a Crown Royal and a Sherlock Holmes pipe. And I told him, you know what? I thought that I had the longest running residency of 27 years, but I found out that you guys have 35. And he goes, keep at it. And it was like, you know what? That may be the best 2 words of advice that anyone could ever give anyone else. Keep at it.
Oh, that's just priceless. Yeah, keep at it, Jon Dee.
Keep at it.
You may get somewhere one of these days.
One of these days.
I am so thrilled that to have you, and there's a lot of ground to cover. Like you know, and so I want to get to it, and I want to start from just the humble beginnings, just like you came to this world, and you had parents, and you lived somewhere, and what was it like, and who are these people in this place?
Wow. You know what? First, it's not just humble beginnings. It's all humble. um, so, I was born in Levelland, Texas.
Levelland.
Just like the McMurtry song.
Yeah.
And I've spent my first 5 years in a little town called Whiteface. And my dad and his father, my grandfather, were cotton farmers. And then in 66, I think it was. So, no, it would have been 65 because I was 6 years old. DuPont came out with Banlon and nylon and Dacron, artificial fibers.
That was the first of it, huh?
Right.
Okay.
And instantly, like overnight, pretty much, the bottom dropped out of the cotton market. One of my first memories is my dad and my grandfather at this yellow marbled linoleum table, and they were going to figure out what to do. And so they had an old percolator coffee pot sitting on a hot pad on the table and a bottle of whiskey. And they were drinking both about equally. Their whole thing was, where are we going to go next? They spread out a map of Texas on the table and said, where's land cheap? They took what little money they had and they put it all together, and they bought this land down on the Texas-Mexico border, because that was still kind of the wild frontier, you know, in the 60s. And we moved wholesale. That's when things kind of started to percolate for me, you know. We were not destitute. Like, I never missed a meal. But we were poor. Although I didn't realize that until I was like 12, probably.
And you realized that because you probably some other kid that you went to their house and went, oh.
Yeah, hey,
Right.
you don't live with your grandparents? And, like, I slept on a pallet, you know, which is a folded up quilt, on the floor of my grandmother and grandfather's house until I was like 8.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is wild.
And
But
you're
see,
lucky to have the pallet.
damn right. And you know what else? I thought it was cool.
Right. I think it's cool still.
I slept on the floor, you
On
know.
a pallet.
On a pallet.
Yeah.
On a quilt my grandmother made.
That's how they did it.
That's how it was done, you know.
Yeah.
And my dad grew up pretty hard, and he was kind of like the archetypical West Texan, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Very few words, you know.
Was that nerve-wracking?
Oh, it was terrifying. Now, he and I butted heads a lot, but he died when I was 17. And I still think about him every single day, at least once. So he left a mark, you know, and a good one.
Yeah. I always hear you talking well about him.
Yeah, he was something else. He lived by the motto that if any man can do it, you can learn how to do it.
Oh, the other one, he said that you're better than no man.
Yeah, he said,
no man.
you're better than no other man, and no other man is better than you.
What a great! I mean, I think that every kid should have that pounded into their skull and stay there.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a good. He gave me, even though he didn't talk much, he gave me a solid platform on which to approach life. The only direct advice he ever gave me. And it was when I was in my early teens, I guess. And he looked at me and he said, D, because they all called me by my middle name. And he said, D, you need to pay attention. And you know what? That's what I've done for most of my life. And the times that I've gotten into trouble are when I wasn't paying attention. you know.
Isn't that incredible?
And my songs, they all are born out of paying attention, you know.
Mm-hmm. I remember your bear drawing with the pay attention.
Yeah, pay attention.
One of the better ones.
Yeah,
We'll talk about the bear drawings later. But
yeah,
pay attention.
My mother was a school teacher. She was like 2 or 3 credits away from actually having a PhD.
Smart.
Ferociously smart woman. To the point where Quemado, which is the little town closest to where we lived,
Quemada,
which means in Spanish burnt, you know, which I think is pretty powerful and informative.
Yeah, just so you know.
Yeah, just so you know. At some point, the ladies' auxiliary had decided that Quemado needed a library, and so they took this little abandoned house, and everybody contributed books, and they had a library, but it died out of neglect because not a lot of readers down there. You know, there's not much time to read because it's hard to make a living there, and you know. So they were going to just ship all these books away. And my mom said, no, we'll take them. And so it was like 12 or 15 big cardboard boxes full of books.
Wow.
And we brought them home and put them up in the attic. And so I literally grew up underneath a library. And I was free to roam and pick any book I wanted to read. The only rule was if I had to ask someone what a word meant or what this thing was about, you don't need to be reading that book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to talk about it.
Exactly. And like I read Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller when I was 13.
No.
Yeah. And I'm like, good God.
Oh, man.
I can't wait to get to Paris.
You know, I can't believe you got that book at 13.
Wow.
I mean, I got it at like 20 or something, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I'm kind of glad almost I didn't.
Yeah.
Get this
Oh no. When he's like killing pigeons in the park and then roasting them over his little gas stove.
Well, and also the way that him and his friends were with the women.
Yeah.
Alone
Oh
was pretty
Lord.
much like
Him and Anise
graphic.
Nin.
Oh, one of the first. Yeah. No, but I couldn't stop reading it.
Oh no, it's brilliant.
Know, when I was older, I mean, I had like 40 Henry Miller books.
But my mom struggled a lot with depression, and through the 60s, you know, they were starting to experiment with electroshock and stuff like that, and so she was in and out of hospitals a lot when I was growing up. And again, as I got older, one day I realized not everybody's mom would go to bed for 4 or 5 days, you know? And so there was always this, she was a beautiful woman, and she was a brilliant woman, but she had a deep brokenness, you know, which frankly, I think most people are, and spend their lives trying to cover it up, you know?
Yeah. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and, you know, like Lenny, like Leonard Cohen says, you know, the cracks are where the light comes in, you know?
Yeah. Lenny C.
It's Lenny C. God. So, anyway, the point of all this being that we were building ourselves. My dad, during the time that I was conscious, during the time that I was aware, he was a cotton farmer. He was a roughneck on oil rigs. He graduated into being a field man that goes around and checks wells and checks pumps and stuff like that.
Was that interesting to you?
It was exotic. And I didn't really understand it. I knew he wanted more. He wanted better. And he was a ranch manager for a fairly big ranch, the Las Vegas ranch in Normandy, Texas. But he had his eyes set on a state job. There was this position that was coming open with the watermaster's office. And the watermaster in Texas monitors the Rio Grande River. And everyone takes water out on both sides. And he was in charge of, or the watermaster's in charge of keeping track of who's taking how much water. Well, he had an 8th grade education. He'd been in the Air Force. But he was also ferociously smart, but in a different way. And in order to get that job, he had to know trigonometry because you're measuring moving acre feet of water. Tricky shit.
Yeah, really.
So he went to the library and checked out books on algebra, calculus, and trigonometry. He made friends with the best math teacher at the Eagle Pass High School. And over the course of about a year, he taught himself trigonometry with the help of this math teacher.
That's ridiculous.
This is a guy that grew up in a one-room shack next to a quarry, you know?
Right.
So sets the bar pretty fucking high, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly.
And I watched this happen. And he got to wear a sidearm because the Rio Grande River is a dangerous place, you know? So all these were like foundational things, you know, that I don't, it's not easy to reconcile even now at 63,
right.
You know, but this is what happened. And
but it's everybody's got their own story of where they came from, right? So you go and then you paint it and then you go, okay, and then so I had all this and then but music became this.
I was always fascinated by music. Like always.
Like from day one, singing to the radio and stuff?
Yeah, and around my house growing up, it was hard country and old-timey music, you know? And a lot of Merle, a lot of Ernest Tubb, you know, the Statler Brothers, for heaven's sakes. Mm-hmm. So I decided I wanted to play. And this is when I was 10 or 11.
Okay.
And my mom was excited by it, and my dad was completely disdainful of the whole thing. Was like, that's not really a craft or a skill you need to work on, you know. You might want to learn refrigeration or something like that. So I started taking piano lessons from the Baptist church minister's wife. And I at one point was pretty good, you know. I could block out a Protestant hymn with like nobody else.
Is that right?
You know. And then Don Kirshner's rock concert came on.
I know about that.
Midnight Special, for Christ's sake.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we didn't really get TV on a regular basis because there was no such thing as cable back then.
Uh-huh.
And
the signal
depended highly on the meteorological conditions.
Yeah.
So if there's a low bank of clouds, that signal would bounce from San Antonio all the way to us. And so it'd be like this dicey thing, like, is it going to happen tonight?
Right. Oh, cool, though,
happen?
kind of.
And then,
I like it.
Yes! And I saw Wolfman Jack, you know, and the first time that I watched it, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that it was Mark Bolan and T-Rex was the guest.
Really?
And
nice.
It blew my mind, and I'm like, that.
Especially because, was he glammed out?
Oh, he's totally glammed out,
yeah.
like wearing a lady's blouse,
right.
open down to his belly button, and it was like, you know, there were plenty of people that I was growing up around that would, like, look at that and go,
right,
you know,
right.
He looks like a fancy boy, you know.
Yes, exactly.
And but I heard that Les Paul through that Marshall, and I'm like, that's it. And that's what I want to do. And so I went to my parents and asked for a guitar. And, there wasn't a lot of money to go around. And so my dad was like, okay. So he goes over to the market in Mexico and buys me one of those guitars,
Like the really cheap
Yeah,
ones
yeah, yeah.
that you can't hardly play.
You can hardly play it. The action is so high,
Right.
you need a lobster claw to make a chord. And,
Right.
but I gave it a go, But I knew also that what I wanted was an electric guitar. And so, God, I'm making myself sound so old. But these were the days.
Hey, man, what's the, it was the day.
It was the day.
I swear to you, I think about it a lot because I think about my parents and what they grew up with.
Oh, my
and
God.
then their parents and with nothing. And, we are just, communication through radio was a thing.
A big thing.
A huge thing. And that since we don't have it anymore, but it's important to remind people that we're really not that far removed from it.
No, and the whole, check this out. My grandmother on my father's side came to Texas in a wagon, and before she died, she watched men walk on the moon.
Right.
So
exactly.
Just like now,
Yeah.
I remember touring.
You can film a movie on that.
Exactly. And I'm not a digital native. All of this arose over the course of my life. Now, both of my boys, they were born during this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like with William, who's a brilliant songwriter
yes,
in his own right.
We're going to talk about William, and we've had him on the show. Oh, not on this one, but we've had him on the show. So.
Yeah, so anyway, we've come such a distance, and there's so much change.
Yes.
So Sears and Roebuck,
the catalog.
So for Christmas one year, I got an Airline Sears Silvertone guitar that had the little amp in the case. And man, there was no stopping me after that. It's like I became obsessed. And I started seeking out other music. And at a friend of mine's house who lived in the big town, which was Eagle Pass, which was probably 16,000 people, maybe.
Pretty big for that place.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
Camaro was 240 people
right.
if everybody was home,
Right.
But he had the subscription to Rolling Stone.
Okay.
And so I saved up money and subscribed to Rolling Stone. So I had Rolling Stone delivered to Rural Route Star #1. And once a month I would go out and I would get this magazine. And it was just mind-blowing because there's no culture that could be further from the culture I was living in,
Right.
And already the disconnect was starting. And so I played with a couple of people who actually lived in the valley, in Camaro Valley, that were older than me because they were the ones who knew how to play.
Right, they were the only ones
and
who did.
I played bass because that was what they needed, and in order to play, I would have to play bass, but I would watch, and I would
Were you like 14 or 15?
I was 13.
13, okay.
At the time. And then these two dudes show up in town, and it's a small town, so everybody goes, who are these guys? And they were wearing gold thread Western suits, and shit. And they were looking for a bass player. And they lived in a trailer house down by the river. And so I started playing bass with these guys. And it was strictly country covers, like hard country, swinging doors, I got this drinking thing. So, the good stuff.
Yeah.
And we would play roadhouses. There were two, ice houses, that served beer outside the valley, and then one in Eagle Pass. And I was 13 playing in these bars.
That's crazy. Awesome.
And my dad hated it.
I bet.
Oh, because it was just against everything,
Exactly. I'm sure he felt really threatened.
Oh, yeah. And also, I think he had been through so much hard times. He didn't want me to have to do that, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, we all have our own hard times, you know.
And also, I think back. I think it's this day and age. Like we have time to read and we have time to get perspective. And there, you know, so it's like back then it was like, man, we don't have time to play guitars.
Yeah,
There's stuff to
exactly.
do.
That's like a hobby or something.
Yeah,
and we don't have time for hobbies.
And
work has to be
you're
done.
13. You know, you should be.
No,
I know.
I was driving at 13 because we needed it. You know?
Exactly.
So anyway, long story short, which it's already too late for that, but
That's perfect.
so for high school, you had to go to Eagle Pass. Like Quemado had its own little elementary school, and junior high was kind of just an idea then. So for high school, I had to go to Eagle Pass. I was bused round trip 60 miles every day. It was a long process to get to an unpleasant situation.
Right.
You know?
And the hour felt like 5.
Yeah, and the population in Eagle Pass was probably, I'd say at least 90 to 95% Mexican American.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the high school that I was in, there were me and maybe 4 or 5 other Anglo kids, white kids.
Yeah.
And we would just get the shit beat out of us on a regular basis.
Really?
And that's when I started to learn Spanish, you know. And the Pachuco thing was still a viable movement, you know.
Those are street thugs.
Yeah, thugs. And these guys would hang out. You had to walk under this underpass to get to the high school. And they would hang out under the underpass and then take your money, you know, or your lunch or whatever the you had that they wanted.
Right.
And I was talking to my dad about it, and he goes, "You just got to knock one of them out." And so, you know, I'm 13. I'm this chubby little farm kid, you know, and this guy comes on to me, and I hit him as hard as I could in the face, and he fell down. And that was that.
It worked.
It worked. It quit happening.
That's great. Thank God.
sometimes violence is required.
Yeah, I guess so. Certainly was then.
Where this is going, I guess, is that when I got to high school, the Mexican music, the Mexican Americans, and the straight up Mexican, because they were the rich kids from the other side that would come to high school in America, you know, to get a better education, and that's when the Mexican culture started really seeping in, you know, and the music, which was just crazy, like wild, exotic. I mean, you know, the grito itself, you know, which is when they throw back their heads, and it's just like every ounce of sorrow and joy and pain, and so I was exposed to that, and then Santana sort of came up, and then it made it legitimate, you know?
Oh, yes.
And then it was like,
but that's that electric guitar.
Yo, yeah,
That's,
again.
Because for you, the way you play, I'm like, that was the thing. So let's do another song. Which song are you going to play for us next, Jon Dee?
I'm going to do a song called Place in the Shade.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, this was heavily inspired by a lot of the stuff that we were just talking about. A hotter summer there's never been. Still a stone without a breath of wind. All the farmers prayed for rain again. Amen. July arrived, bearing no relief. So hard one night she cried in disbelief. Had to ask if those were tears or sweat shining on her cheek. Like the field in which we lay, dry as tinder, quick to flame. Sometimes I think we found a place we should have stayed. A place in the shade. A place in the shade. Thought I saw you from across the street. Soft mirage in the heartless heat. Time and temperature said 1 o'clock and 101 degrees. Like the fields in which we lay, dry as tinder, quick to flame. Sometimes I think we found a place we should have stayed. A place in the shade. 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 Yeah, man.
I hope I just blew that out. And
Could you feel how hot it was?
I did get a little warm.
Yeah, yeah.
Gorgeous, as always. I love your catalog, but we're not getting to it yet.
No.
I mean, we did get to it,
Some of
as
it.
it were. But we're going to now go into, because we're getting to the juicy part here. UT. How did it come about? And tell us about how, when you got here, what happened.
Okay. It's a long story, but I'm going to make it as short as I can. Here's the deal. I grew up under a library, and so I didn't have to really struggle much with the educational aspects of the high school. And I made really good grades, even though I was not always there, you know?
It just, you could do it.
Yeah, I could do it. And so if you go back and you look in my Eagle Pass Eagles yearbooks,
Was that handy?
I don't have them. I refuse to have them, and I've never been to a single high school reunion ever because they don't understand. I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't have a lot of friends there. So anyway.
Why go back?
Yeah, why go back? Why would I go back? So my senior year, I was just not there most of the time. But I would still come in on the test days and pass.
Yeah.
You know? And my grades were good enough because in those days, if you were in the top certain percentage of your class, you automatically got into UT.
Okay.
And my grades were high enough that I got into the honors program. But halfway through my senior year, I get called into the principal's office. And the principal, Mr. Moncada, said, "Look, man, you don't really want to be here, and we're not that crazy about having you here. Why don't we just call it a draw? And I'll give you your diploma now, And then we don't have to bother this whole attendance. Oh, he's here. Oh, he's not here.
What a gift.
Yeah, what a gift. So my brother was already in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
He's 3 years ahead of me. And he had also gone through Plan 2, which is the honors program. And it was too late for me to get in to that semester. So I moved to Austin like spring-ish in 77 and spent that spring and that summer working at a water heater factory and playing guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And just by myself. Anyway, so I moved to town, and there were a couple of older dudes who graduated before me that I knew had gotten this house here in Austin. I was like, I need a place to live. I bet, Lee and Les would let me rent a room from them. And so I moved into this old house full of hippies.
Nice.
In Clarksville. And back when Clarksville was like sort of a down the hills,
Yeah.
old grand old houses that had fallen apart, sort of,
Right. Right.
Like our house had a breakfast nook.
Yeah.
It's a house full of hippies with a breakfast nook.
Right.
And I met so many of the Austin pioneers through these guys because it was sort of a kind of a cultural hub,
Yeah, and you were by Mouse, right?
Right, right.
A lot of musicians like to hang there, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
that's a hamburger joint.
Yeah,
like a five and dime.
Yeah,
right, gross.
Absolutely. And it turns out, I mean, at the time I didn't know it, but Townes Van Zandt lived about 6 blocks away.
Right.
So I arrived, and the first night I was there, they sat me down at the kitchen table. And there's these, wise old hippies who were like 24 or 25.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And the first thing they said was, "You just missed it. This town used to be so cool."
Oh, no.
And so it's hilarious to me now when I hear somebody who moved here in 2000 telling somebody who moved here last year, "Oh, you just missed it."
So yeah, or somebody that moved here in 2017.
Right.
And oh man, it was so cool.
It's like, no, you didn't.
Doesn't everybody just want to feel like they,
yeah,
they're the thing, and
their part was the special part.
Yeah, we got here right in time, and you guys messed
exactly.
up. You showed up too late,
exactly.
But it's all right.
So I went to UT, and I moved into a co-op, and I was in Plan 2, and at that point, there was only 2 ways you could go, doctor or lawyer, out of Plan 2. And my brother was a doctor, so I thought, I guess I'll be a lawyer, And a lot of things conspired against that decision, but I made it through the first semester and acquitted myself nicely. And but at this co-op, which was this crazy place, which is still going, actually, 21st Street Co-op.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
It was awesome. And they had a house band there. And I joined their house band, and I started learning a lot about punk rock and because that was fairly new. And, I remember listening to Nevermind the Bollocks and going, man, I don't know what's going on here, but this is awesome. Like it makes my heart beat fast.
Right. That Sex Pistols record is
God.
It's an important seminal.
Yeah, that and the Alex Chilton stuff and
the Clash.
I owe so much to my friend Drew Shirts, who's a little bit older than me, that basically took me under his wing and said, "You need to listen to this. Here, you need to listen to this." The DBs.
I don't even know the DBs.
Oh, man. Chris Stamey was in the band. Peter Holsapple, who later was the keyboard player for REM.
Right.
All of whom I got to meet eventually,
Right.
But anyway, Rocky Erickson and all the folklore behind Rocky, who knows what's true and what isn't,
Right.
much like the stories I'm telling you right now. so I started playing with them, and we decided, actually, they were kind of doing Rolling Stones covers, and then they started doing some Iggy Pop covers. Like we did Search and Destroy, and at the same time, Hey, You Get Off My Cloud, and
I like it.
yeah, and we would play at the parties that they had at the co-op, and I'd probably been playing guitar longer than any of them, and so I got to be like the guitar guy,
Right. The guy out front.
the guy out front playing guitar, and I loved it, and it was fantastic, and everybody.
It's college parties.
Yeah, it was a college party, and everybody was drunk. Everybody was high.
Yeah. Making
uh,
out, having fun.
Oh man, and
Jumping in the pool.
The girls.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was so fantastic. Meanwhile, there was this club called Raoul's that opened up.
Yeah.
Well, they had been open, but they were largely a Tejano bar, and it was run by Joseph and Bobby, and they were the only place that would give punk bands a place to play, because they figured out that a lot of people want to see this stuff.
Yeah.
And so
It's a niche.
it's a niche. And
Yeah.
so that band, that college house band, which was called the Whippets, by the way.
And that,
No, we were after the dogs, but we can call that. So
of course I went there.
you're right. So anyway, we played there a couple of times, and then the infamous Huns bust happened, which put it on the map. Do you know about that?
Tell me.
Oh well,
I don't think I do.
they were the smart punks, which Phil Tolstead was sort of Austin's version of Johnny Lydon, like
Okay.
really, really brilliant, and more really of a provocateur than an
Right.
actual songwriter or performer. And his whole thing was about stirring shit up.
That's
you know?
what Punk's whole thing was.
Exactly. And so they were doing a show with him spray painted gold, mounted on an enormous cross on the stage. He performed from the cross.
Wow.
And I think one
Wow.
of the song that they were playing when they got busted was "The Shaw Sleeps in Lee Harvey Oswald's Grave," I think maybe.
Wow.
And anyway,
It's punching you right in the mouth.
yeah, so somehow the cops got called because it was a volume complaint, a noise complaint from some neighboring people.
They didn't know what to make of the noise.
Here's the deal. Though, is I have it on pretty good authority that one of the Huns themselves made the phone call to the cops. So the cops show up, and they're trying to make them stop, and they won't stop. And so they're like up there trying to get him down off the cross, and he's spitting on the cops. And I used to know the cop's name, but it turned into a brawl.
Wow.
And of course, it was in both the Daily Texan and the Statesman the next day, and we had arrived. Like, punk rock was the thing, man.
And then Raoul started filling up, didn't
it
it?
started being packed every night.
Right.
So one of the bands I saw when I played there was this band called the Skunks. It was a rock and roll trio, and I didn't want to admit it, but I thought it was pretty fucking cool. It was like, they were singing original songs, and that really caught me. The fact that they weren't a cover band.
Right.
They weren't playing other people's stuff.
And Jesse's pretty cool.
Jesse Sublett is cool as
Yeah.
He kind of defined a lot of what was cool then, for me anyway.
I think for everybody, because he was the forefront of the whole movement.
Yeah.
Right? Him,
Yeah.
Kathy, and
Yeah, him,
and,
Kathy,
you
the
too, but they
Violators.
were the way they let you in, right?
Yeah. Their guitar player,
Kathy Valentine.
Kathy Valentine, who went on to be in the Go-Go's.
Yeah, exactly.
So she did well.
You might have heard of them.
Yeah.
I think they just got in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Their guitar player, Eddie Munoz, decided to go out to L.A. to seek his fame and fortune, and he ended up as a road like guitar tech for Elvis Costello or something.
Cool gig.
Then he went on to be in the Plimsouls with Peter Case. Yeah, so
Okay.
Eddie did well for himself.
Yeah.
But they needed a guitar player.
Right.
And so their tour manager, Richard Luckett, was walking through the neighborhood of the college house one day, and we were playing upstairs, and he heard the guitar, and he was like, So he went up and he watched a little bit, and he said, "Hey, I want you to come audition for the Skunks." And I was like, "Audition?" I remember even then, my ego was so
That's awesome.
so intractable. I'm like, audition.
I can
You
relate
just
to
heard
that,
me
though.
play. You
Yeah.
know? So in my mind, what
what you
I was
mean.
going to do is I was going to go and do it. And whether they wanted me or they didn't, I wasn't going to do it. That was my punk rock idea. You
It's
know?
like that's super punk, Jon
Yeah,
Dee,
it's
I
as
mean,
punk as it gets.
It's as punk as it gets.
But it went so well, and it was so much fun. I was so intimidated by these guys, you know, because they were a little older than I was. They were definitely more experienced than I was, and they were writing songs. You know?
Yeah.
So then overnight, I was in the band, and it turned out to be like this amazing gift where we got to open for most of the punk rock bands because there were only really like there were so many punk rock bands in those days. But,
Right.
But the two main bands were us, which were sort of representing, we were really more hard rock with confrontational lyrics. You know?
I know. I'm familiar with the catalog. Yeah. It's great. I love it.
And the Standing Waves, which had Larry Seaman and Randy Franklin. And they were more representative of the Talking Heads and the sort of colder or cooler, more intellectual stuff.
Right.
And so
Good way to put it.
when you're that age and in a scene like that, you have rivals. And so they were our rivals. You know, they were, and there's all kinds of hijinks with that. But with the Skunks,
That was fun.
we got to open for John Cale at the Armadillo.
Right.
We also opened for him in San Antonio at Randy's Rodeo. We opened for the Ramones.
Wow.
And the thing is, there was not much to choose from, so we got a lot of the gigs.
I got you. But you guys were just dripping with cool and that whole attitude. So
we had a following.
And Jesse was the one up front selling the whole thing.
He sold it. He sold it. Man, people loved it, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a damn good band.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I got to see it at, the thing at
reunion.
Sam's Town Point.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that so much because I wasn't here. I was too young and in school, and not here yet. But I just was so thrilled that I got to see
You were
that.
born cool, Karl. So, anyway.
Yeah, so you got you're opening up for Cale. You're opening up for the Ramones. Then you
Magazine. We opened for Magazine.
And the Clash.
The Clash, which here's where that story goes. During all those stuff before the Clash, I was still going to UT.
Oh wow.
Thank you, amphetamines. You know, because I was still turning in my homework, and I'm still studying, and then I'm playing in this punk rock band at night, and
having a party
and
too.
having
I'm sure.
a wild party,
Yeah.
beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
You know? And also just wads of cash every weekend. You know,
Nice.
For a farm boy from the border, it was like,
Right.
These were exciting times, man.
Absolutely.
So we landed this gig at the Armadillo as the third act on this bill that was us, Joe Ely and the original Flatlanders, you know,
Yeah.
which had Lloyd Maines and
Yeah.
what's his name, the piano player, Reese Winans.
Reese Winans.
And they were fantastic. So it was us, it was the Skunks, and it was the Joe Ely band, and then it was the Clash. And I already had, you know, 2 Clash records, and I knew this was the thing.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't wait.
What'd you have, Sandinista?
I had given them enough rope.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so London Calling had just come out. And we opened up for them, and so I'm in the wings, and right before they went on, the house lights all went down, every house light. So we were in complete darkness, and they all went out and picked up their instruments, and then they started London Calling, and all the lights in the place came on, like over the audience, over the band, and Joe Strummer counted it off by slamming the mic stand on the stage. He'd go, 1, 2, 3, 4, ka-ching, ching, ching, ching. It was like, I'm about to have a heart attack. I'm like, I have seen.
And the light blows up.
The
right
light
when
is
it comes
exploding everywhere, and it was like, it's like.
And you're on the side of the stage.
Yeah.
You just opened up for this.
Yeah, we just opened for him, and I'm like.
Some people think London Calling, by the way, is like when they do the list of best records ever made, it's always in the top 5.
It's such a great record.
Yeah.
I live by the river. So, anyway, it was mind-blowing. And then we had sort of started at that point playing occasionally at the Continental Club, which Wayne Nagel was booking.
Yeah.
And he was really into this whole punk rock thing. But the Continental Club, which had been around since the 50s.
Right. It was a burlesque
they were like
place. And,
cocaine cowboys, you know?
Right.
I mean, it was a lot more about, you know, Gary P. Nunn and that kind of stuff. And
Right.
they didn't want these young dudes in there, you know,
Right.
tearing the place up. And
Right.
well, anyway, we went straight from the Armadillo to the Continental Club with the Clash and Joe Ely. They kicked everybody else out of the club and locked the doors. And we jammed all night long. So at one point I was playing.
My mouth fell open.
At one point I was playing some Buddy Holly song. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was That'll Be the Day. And Joe Ely was singing, and Mick Jones was playing guitar. And then I just sort of stayed on stage, and I actually jammed with Joe Strummer, and lots of stuff was going on, you know?
Yeah.
And anyway, at the end of the night, when everything had run out, and it was time to go, they unlocked the doors of the Continental, and they opened the door, and the sun was up.
Nice.
And it's like, oh,
I was
Jesus.
hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, my God, I've got to be in class.
Oh, no.
And so I go back and I get my books, and I'm like running, you know, and I have a really bad headache for several reasons. And I go and I walk into this auditorium classroom, you know, you enter at the top, and it's like bleachers basically down for a lecture hall. And it was like in the movies, all the sound went, it was dead silent in my head. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh, I don't belong here. And I turned around, and I went straight to the bursar's office and said, I'd like to withdraw. And they were like, well, would you like to see a counselor? Or you know, I'm like, no, I know exactly what I'm doing. I want to withdraw. Okay. And I went across the street to the co-op, went back to the co-op I lived in, then went to the UT co-op and sold all my books, took the cash, and moved into a little ratty house in South Austin with a bunch of other musicians, and
you were on your way.
That was it.
You were on your way. Let's do another song.
Right on. Pace or stack train at the crossing. Ring the bell and drop the weight. Full moon on the quarter panel. Bless my soul, I will be late. Pete and El Nino. Oh, Mr. Hardwick holds it down. Pegleg Gill and the Tosca girls, and Shoeshine Charlie in the cold, cold ground. Here we go. Ah, here we go. From Wednesday till eternity, do not look on the bathroom shelf. It's 10:34. Strap it up, boys. These kittens aren't going to drown themselves singing me and Pete and El Nino. Oh, Duplantis holds it down. Pegleg Gill and 2 out of 3 Tosca girls, and Shoeshine Charlie in the cold, cold ground. Here we go. Ah, here we go. It's all about change, man. First, Pete moved east back to Houston. Raphael went to play with Leonard Cohen's band out west. Then Leonard died. El Nino went to find his biological family. And who knows what ever happened to the rest. Singing me and Pete and El Nino. Ah, we all hold it down. Pegleg Gill and the very last Tosca girl, and Shoeshine Charlie in the cold, cold ground. Shoeshine Charlie in the cold, cold ground. Shoeshine Charlie in the cold, cold ground. Here we go. Ah, here we go. Ah, here we go. Shoeshine Charlie in the cold, cold ground. There you go.
Oh my, man, that's a really great version of that song. That it's such a wonderful homage to the Continental Club.
You know, it's just like so much of my life has centered on the Continental Club. You know, I mean, touring for 35 years, and it's like you go out with so-and-so and have a good tour or a bad tour, it doesn't matter. I know I'm coming home to the Continental Club.
Yeah.
And particularly Wednesday nights. I mean, we call it services. Wednesday services.
That's it.
And, you know, so, you know, we were talking about Shoeshine Charlie.
Yeah.
He was a fixture there. Like,
exactly.
When I first started playing there with the True Believers, he was still around. He was still there. And
True Believers with Alejandro Escovedo, by the way, if you don't know.
So I'll quickly tell that story. Because it's really, we could spend 2 hours talking about that, because that was.
This isn't a 3-hour Joe Rogan show.
No.
I mean, we could do it.
We could do it. Where is the DMT? That's what I want to
right?
know. So, of course, the Skunks broke up.
Right.
Well, no. There was actually almost a fist fight between me and Jesse, and because of ego, and mine. And his.
Sure.
And I left the band and was promptly replaced. And they went on with the Skunks for another 4 or 5 years, I think.
Right.
You know, and so suddenly I was loose, and I'd been writing songs, but I did not like the way my voice sounded, and I didn't have the confidence in it. And so I did a series of other bands, including The Lift, and I played with Lisa Rhodes. And I would write the songs, or write most of the songs, and feed them to the singer. And that was good for me, because it gave me confidence that the songs were good, you know. But I was still being the guitar slinger.
Right.
Like I'd be writing the songs and feeding them to the singer. And not to say that they were not also writing songs and singing them, but I was.
You got to see how your songs worked out while still being the gunslinger.
Exactly. So, but my main focus was being a hotshot,
Yeah.
And anyway, I did all kinds of stuff. I was when Luann Barton, who's Queen of the Blues, when she put out her record that she did with Jerry Wexler, I was in her band. I got to.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I got to tour with Luann Barton, and that was a wild ride and a wild education. And it was great because it made the punk rockers mad because I was playing with the blues chanteuse, and it made the blues guys mad because this punk rocker was playing with the blues chanteuse,
Right.
I loved it.
And you were psyched. You're like, I'm right where I need to be.
If people are mad at me, I must be doing something right. So, but that didn't last long, and I was constantly getting involved in other things. I was in a band with Chris Danemeyer and Sally Norvell, who was my first wife, called the Gator Family, and we played Duke's Royal Coach and all this stuff. So anyway, I needed to be bringing in more money than I was bringing in, and gigs had dried up a little bit, and I was...
You're painting houses, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I was dishwashing. I was a dishwasher at the old Pecan Street Cafe.
Very nice.
Moved up to be a line cook, and that was just a year and a half, maybe. Painting houses with Dickie Lee Irwin and with Beaver Nelson, both beautiful souls.
Beaver still paints houses.
Oh, yeah, he's good at it. I mean, he's the real thing.
Yes.
He's the real thing. So anyway... I just kind of quit going out to see music, and when I left The Lift, which has been basically a pop band, I was like, there's something else. I hear something else, and it's more raw, and it's more guitar, and I don't know what it is I'm looking for, but and I would go out and I would see bands, and like I'd watch them for 20 minutes and go, nah. And I'd leave, this is not what I'm looking for, And that band Rank and File had come to town. And that was Alejandro Escovedo with the two Kenman brothers, Chip and Tony. And
He's sure been in a lot of outfits.
Yeah, exactly. And they were, dressing country and playing kind of rockified country music, country punk, which I hate that term.
Right.
It's no such thing, really. But anyway, they were really, really popular and had like a couple of like minor hits, And but there's a fight between Al and Chip, and so Al left the band, and he moved his brother Javier from San Diego here to Austin, and he started a band called True Believers, and all of a sudden people were talking about it. And I'm like, all right. I mean, is it more of that dress up stuff like, like Rank and File? Or they wear little kerchiefs around their neck,
right? Putting on a show,
right? Right.
And
I went to see them, and it was fucking raw, and it was true, and it was not like anything anybody else was doing. It took education from hard country and punk rock at the same time, and it was like this lyrical blend of really like from right here music,
True.
And I was like, fuck, this is it. This is the thing. This is what I had wanted.
That's what you were looking for.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so I kind of started talking to Al, and he and I sort of became friends, and they had a gig opening for the Long Riders at Liberty Lunch. And he said, "Hey, you play lap steel, right?" And I kind of did. I had one, and I knew how to tune it, and I could do a couple of tricks on it that looked really impressive. And so he said, "Man, bring out your lap steel to the Long Riders gig. Hell, bring your guitar and just sit in." I'm like, "I don't really know the songs." He goes, "It doesn't matter.
Right. Nice.
It doesn't matter. I'll just tell you what key we're in, and you just play."
Right.
And it was fantastic, and it was like the hair on my arms was standing up. You know,
mine right now. You telling me?
I know. And after the show, Al was like, "Hey, we're playing this other thing at Clubfoot next Saturday. Why don't you come and sit in?" And I was like, "All right, yeah." And so they never actually asked me to join the band. They just sort of hijacked me, you know. In fact, the way Al tells it, which is slightly different, and actually which may be closer to the truth, is he says that he told me that they had a record deal, and that's why I started playing with them. And in truth, they didn't yet have a record deal. They did, but then it went south. So anyway, it was just this feeling of authenticity and like truth and
that was sounded like a very important moment for you.
Absolutely. And it started this whole new thing that I felt like was truer to what was going on inside me.
Right.
Than any of the other things I'd done. The Skunks were true to me at that point.
Yes.
You know?
But you were younger.
But I was younger. And so at 25, I started playing with True Believers. And Al had already been in the Nuns and then Rank and File, which toured a lot. And he had that Escovedo charm, man.
He is so,
you know, he's smooth
and slick
and deep.
But yeah, it's slick as I mean it like in a very nice way because he polished is maybe better.
And charisma,
yes,
charisma for days.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, I was hooked into that band without him even trying.
Yes,
and he worked his magic with other people, and so we drove out to L.A. in the van. It was Denny DeGorio, Ray Washam, who went on to be the drummer for Ministry.
All right. Al's band.
Right.
Uncle Al.
Right. And Denny DeGorio on bass, Javier, and me and Al. And we drove out to L.A. and we recorded a record or some demos with Steve Berlin, who's the sax player from Los Lobos.
Yeah.
And so while we were there, we got to hang out with Los Lobos a little bit.
Nice.
And that brought me back to my border thing. And like I could speak Spanish better than Al, you know, at that point. And so I got to hang with Los Lobos, who hadn't yet had a hit, but everybody was talking about him, right?
Yeah.
And so the demos that we did with Steve were good, but they weren't exactly what we were all trying to do. But they did secure us the attention of EMI.
Okay.
And so at the same time, Los Lobos released Will the Wolf Survive, and they blew up. And because of the Mexican connection and the new American music connection, like I was just, you know, in Almost Famous, the scene where the guy's on the roof and he goes, "It's all happening."
Yeah.
That's how it felt because it was effortless. Things were just falling into place.
Right.
And so we get signed by EMI Rounder, because Rounder had been a folk label, but they wanted to be bigger. And so they joined with EMI. And it was like, all of a sudden I'm in a band that's got a major label deal. And we recorded the first record here
Right here
at
at Arlyn.
Arlyn.
Oh!
I was standing right behind that dude over there. And it was heady stuff. And we were produced by Jim Dickinson.
Jim Dickinson.
Who
Nice. Not Bruce Dickinson.
No. Jim Dickinson, who the piano on Wild Horses.
Oh yeah.
That's Jim Dickinson.
Okay.
And if you watch the bootleg underground Rolling Stones documentary Cocksucker Blues.
Yeah.
The scene where they're sitting on the Rolling Stones plane playing poker.
Yeah.
And there's a guy with a beard wearing sunglasses
That's Dickinson.
dealing cards. That's Dickinson.
All right.
And so he shows up and produces us. So I'm like working with this legendary guy with my blood brothers, and one of the things about being the Believers was you didn't write your song and hand it off to somebody else. You wrote your song and you sang it.
Right.
And so I owe Alejandro for a lot of things. A lot of what I know about what it takes to write a song comes from Al, from working with Al all those years. And, anyway, I sang 3 songs on the record,
Yeah.
and so it comes out on EMI, and Los Lobos, finally, How Will the Wolf Survive was like a certified hit.
Yeah.
And so they asked us to go out with them to support the record. And in those days, which was the tail end of the empire, the rock and roll empire.
Yes.
Before the great structures began to crumble and fray.
Yeah.
That was a thing. And when you had a hit, you toured it as long as it was a hit.
Yeah.
And so they had a bus and we had a van, and we would open every show they did. And they played for one tour we were on with them was 5 months straight.
Wow.
Where it would
Like
be
4 nights a week?
4 to 5 nights a week, sometimes 6.
Wow.
Like they were
in demand.
They were like a wedding band from East LA who had hit it, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, Hidalgo is a sweet soul, and Louis was a brilliant songwriter. And Cesar was the king of the guitar slingers, you know? And that whole band was just incredible. So it was like going to school every night, you know?
Right.
And in a lot of ways, I learned a lot of things about how stuff works by touring with them. And the True Believers just got stronger and stronger, you know? And then we started touring on our own, and we were hard men. Like, we would go out and tour like months, 2 or 3 months at a time. It's just one photo I remember after Ray left the band. We had a drummer named Kevin Foley, and this photo of him asleep on the floor in the green room with a pizza box folded in half for his pillow. And it was like, that was those days.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember making a lot of money. I somehow...
Probably not.
No. I somehow managed to pay rent and eat. But
you're getting so good.
Yeah, who cares about that stuff? I mean, I was getting to live what I wanted to live, you know, and it was messy.
Yeah.
It was messy. Mistakes were made.
Yeah.
You know, and it was large, and I was learning, and
it's a lot of energy that runs through you when you're up there doing that stuff.
Yeah. Christ.
Every bit of the audience goes through you.
Yeah, you become a conductor.
Yes.
You know.
Exactly.
So anyway, we made a second record for EMI, and the second record was way better than the first. And just as it was about to be released, they had a purge at EMI, and they dropped 30-something acts, including Lou Reed,
right,
David Bowie.
So you feel a little bit better about yourself.
Right, the Red Hot Chili Peppers got dropped.
What kind of stew nod was running that show?
Exactly. And I just remember Joe Nick Petoskey was our manager.
Joe Nick Petoskey.
And
nice.
he went out to L.A. to find out what the
Great
fuck's
writer,
going on.
Joe Nick.
A brilliant writer.
Yeah, thank you.
His book about Willie is incredible.
I haven't. His book about Stevie is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't read the Willie one yet.
Have you read the one about Selena? It's
no
brilliant.
I bet.
So, anyway, basically, Joe Nick went out to L.A. to find out what had happened, and he walked into the EMI offices, and it's abandoned. There's like one person there, and it's basically a secretary that tells him, yeah, we basically have merged with blah, blah, blah records, and they fired me too. I'm just here getting my stuff. And so
it's a rough business, man.
So, but word was out about us already, and people were talking about this second record, and demos had been flying around. Right. And instantly Mercury stepped up. And Mercury was like, we want to buy the second record from EMI. And EMI said no.
What?
And we were like, this is our life. This is our work. What do you mean no? And EMI said, well, in the business world, they said, it's worth more to us as a loss. We can write it off as a loss.
Right.
And the amount that we were able to write it off for was not, I mean, it was way more than what Mercury was offering to buy it for. And so that was that, you know.
How about, okay, so now sell me my record back for $1.
Exactly.
And I'll go take it to Mercury, and
but
they can
what are
release
you going to do with it?
Yeah, why are you going to, that's unfortunately there's a lot of stories like that out there, and it's really,
okay.
I'm sure that's why the record labels ultimately don't really exist anymore.
No, they don't deserve to.
Right.
You know, I mean, they died slow, bloody, pitiful, horrendous.
I was there at the end of it with Casey.
Yeah, well-deserved deaths, you know.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it just threw us for a loop because this was everything to us. And
it's like it's like you burned something, and then somebody took it from you and said, you can't have it back. It's over here. It's going to just be sitting here lonely.
And check this out. It became sort of like a status symbol in like the inner circle of the record industry to have the demos of the second record. So they were all passing it around.
Wow. Does nobody cruel. And nobody to this day can listen to that record?
No. Rhino, 15 years after the fact, finally acquired the rights and put it out. And you can find it. It's called Hard Road.
Can you find it on vinyl?
There are copies.
I'm a vinyl guy.
Oh, me too. I love that. The crackle and pop.
Oh, you got to have a little crackle. So I think it's time for another song, Jon Dee.
I agree. I'm going to do a song that I wrote and recorded in the True Believers, and then years later came back and I did it again.
Awesome.
Oklahoma by the afternoon, OKC by 3. Gotta make Missouri, well, it's still early. Into Illinois by 3, Collinsville, Edwardsville, Maryville, under the moon. Stopped and slept on a picnic table. I was out of there. Wrapped my head in a black bandana, up and out of there. I stopped and saw my truck stop friend, tried to buy 5 and they gave me 10. Wish me luck, set me off again, I was out of there. The moon over Maryville. Maryville had a lucky moon, Lucky moon, did it shine? 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 The moon over Maryville. Maryville had a lucky moon. Lucky moon, did it shine? 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 Lucky moon. Yeah, man.
I love that song so much, and I'm familiar with that from your solo. I didn't know it was a true believer.
Yeah.
Great job. It's really all the time we have, Jon Dee. Yeah, somehow, and we didn't even really get to much of your. I mean, it's amazing. We could be here for hours. Do you have anything else you'd like to say before we sign off with?
Yeah, here's the deal: is we're so lucky that they still let us do this. And the thing is, if you do it long enough, the story's too long to tell in one sitting.
There it is. So there you have it. If you've enjoyed this show on the CW, there's a longer version on our YouTube channel. Go to the Songwriters Across Texas YouTube channel and check that out. And check out some of the other goodies we got there. Thanks again, Jon Dee.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Karl. I love you.
Love you
that.
too, brother. All right. Good night.
Thank you so much, guys.